Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Gitchier-Hartman and I am a member of the Phys Ed Summit and Phys Edagogy teams. We are almost done with the Phys Ed Summit 2016 this year, and I am really pumped up and excited to introduce you to Jace Ferguson, who is presenting a session called Assessment Fixes in PE. Just one final reminder from my end that we have a session survey at physedagogy.com. If you complete the survey, then we get your awesome feedback, and in return, we will send you a certificate of completion via email that you can use for your professional learning hours in your school district. So take it away, Jace.
Thank you, Sarah. And first off, good morning to a lot of those people in North America. I am currently in Dubai, where it is in the middle of the afternoon. So I'm wide awake, and I hope hope you guys are as well. So let's just get started here with a little bit of, and I'll start sharing my presentation. So what I wanted to talk about today was just assessment fixes for physical education. Assessment's always been one of those areas that people tend to be afraid of, have a little anxiety over, mostly because that's how we're reporting to our parents, our students, and also to the community about just the learning outcomes in this class. So what I want to talk about today is just a brief introduction to kind of what assessment is and where it's going, also who I am, what's going on in PE, kind of the practices versus where it could be potentially going. Why do we need proper assessment in PE? What are some of these underpinning issues that are in our assessment practices? And also the fixes that we can use to help bring our assessment practices and making them go a lot smoother and to communicate a lot more efficiently to our students. So first off, I just want to tell you a little bit about myself. In 2006, I graduated from the University of Alberta with my Bachelor of Physical Education. And then while I was working, I went back to school and got my Master's of Science in Recreation and Sports Science from Ohio University. I've been teaching various roles throughout my career, from 2006 to 2015, and just physical education. I've been teaching social studies, also program coordinators in different schools throughout Alberta. In 2013 to 2015, I was part of the Health and Physical Education Council of Alberta, which is the largest specialist council in Canada. And my role was I went from regional representative to do professional development workshops for teachers to also becoming the Vice President of Curriculum and Leadership Development, where it was my role and responsibility to develop leadership and professional development opportunities for teachers. Before I left, one of the things, we started developing a mentorship program in Alberta, which has finally been published, and I was super excited to see that. And now I am at was physical education for KG2 and grade 1 in a Universal American School in Dubai. I'm now in a grade 9 position with a grade level coordinator, and also teaching a sports education model class, which a little bit of experimental education going on there, but it's super excited to do it. So before we start, I want to kind of get just some terminology out in the open so we're all on the same page. First off, when I talk about standards or outcomes, these are published statements of the expected outcomes of learning. The mark or your score is a number or letter given to any student performance that may contribute to letter determination of a grade. These can also be formative marks or summative marks. I'll talk about those two in a second. A grade. It's a symbol, number, or letter reported at the end of a period of time as a summary statement of or for student learning. These are your artifacts of learning, and this is where professional judgment can come into play, because these are the things that we are communicating out to parents on report cards, online, methods like that. And then formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment designed to help students improve the learning experience. This is assessment for learning. This is where we as professionals get to see the progress, where they are in those steps. It can also be used to aid in professional judgment calls. Summative assessment. These are designed to measure student achievement. These are your grades. These are anything that's used to calculate for that student. So this is assessment of, but also for learning. This is to see that learning has taken place, but it's also part of the learning journey for the students. So these are used to make statements of learning status at a specific point in time. Now, What's going on in PE assessment? So I have two little videos I want to show you, and I actually got this from another presentation, which it really stood with me. So I want you to watch, and this is the difference between the pit stops in 1950s and the pit stops in the 2013 Formula One races.
Hey, Jace, unplug your headphones for a second.
Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch. The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stops.
So I just want to, and one of the things I really like about the first part of this video is we all sat and watched that one guy try to change the tire and struggle. Well, not only did we watch, but his entire crew members stopped and just to watch him. And I want to talk about that after you see the changes into the 2013 Melbourne. So why the change? Doing the exact same job, but over the years, things have changed. Was it the change in the rules, change in the mindset? Was it the input from stakeholders? Was it just a change in thinking? Or was it from looking at fixing broken practices? The true story behind that is they had to change the pit stop rules because audiences were getting bored. They weren't enjoying the races. After that, that's where they started changing the rules, putting more people into place, putting more supports into place, using better technology. But then people started questioning it because this is where they started to win races. So they started questioning, like, how can I get the most out of my time with the situation that we have? People essentially started looking at how to fix broken practices. Talking back to that initial person who was struggling, one person changing the tire, stuck on one tire, held up the whole situation. Someone saw it as a problem, identified it, found ways to solve it, and implemented those solutions. We went from a 1 minute to 2 minute pit stop to a 10-second pit stop, and that's on a bad day. So what's going on in PE assessment? So I have a video of a professional hockey player, and let's just put him in a position that he's in our class. We've done a class on manipulations using a stick. I want you to watch his assessment video and then maybe think about how would we assess this student? our video evidence there, what do we look at when we're assessing that student? Do we focus on that mastery of skill, or is it the number and quality of puck movements? What about the effort that's given in class? Is locomotive ability, attitude, the tactical thinking, positive interactions? We have all these different things that are coming out. But the main thing behind our physical education programs is that we should be giving students the tools and attitudes to be physically literate, healthy, active individuals throughout their lifetime. So how we assess these things is going to be purely based on what are your priorities as an educator? Where are you at in that journey with your students? Do our students have the mastery of those basic skills to move on and enjoy those higher areas behind what it takes to be a healthy and active individual? And that's why we need to have proper assessment in physical education. If we look at a holistic approach of our student, our physical literacy is just 1/4 of the overall student's learning needs. We have our mathematics, language, music, but physical literacy, that's one of those literacies that stays with our students throughout their entire lifetime. We start with our basic movements, so from the inside of our circle, and then we radiate out into the more advanced, higher order thinking skills, which determine what your careers or what your path you want to take in your journey. You may be successful with those, or you may stop and just enjoy that spot in your journey. But that is why we need to have that proper assessment tool for our parents, for our teachers, because this is a critical element of the child's overall literacy skills. They need to provide clear and effective feedback to communicate what's really going on and their development with that area. So one thing I always ask myself is, how confident am I that my current assessment practice is providing meaningful and accurate feedback that encourages student growth and development? Is everything that I'm providing for our student putting them through the needs that they need? Are they requiring the feedback that they need to have to take their learning that one step further? That's always a question I like to always ask myself, and always encourage other professionals to ask them of that departments as well. How confident are we that we're providing our assessment is giving them meaningful and accurate feedback? I want to talk about some of the underpinning issues in our physical education assessment practices. One is just the professionalism of our assessment. A lot of the culture and a lot of the school thinking behind in some of the schools is you just teach gym, it's just a gym class. Sometimes that's a school culture mentality. That's also might be a teacher mentality. But we're there to encourage student growth and not just the athletically gifted. So this comes down to consistency and accountability of teachers. One of my favorite PE movies is Mr. Woodcock. Probably the worst role model for a physical educator ever. Granted, it was a funny movie, but is that professional? And always look at that in terms of professionalism. So we need, as professionals, we need to change the mindset of the profession. This is where they have the lack of trust in our professional judgment as physical educators. Assessment should be designed using our professional judgment. We should be given the tools and the support that our professional judgment holds a high value. And this is where we need to go against the grain of, well, it's just a gym class, you just teach PE. So the question isn't this assessment is subjective, but is it credible and defensible? Can it be accurate and repeated again and again? It could be based on your own professional observations, as long as it's credible and defensible. When you develop practices that are based on your standards and outcomes, that is clearly understood by administration, teachers, students, and parents. And you also need to develop a shared understanding of performance standards and a unified and connected approach to the program assessment within your physical education program. Not just your specific class, but through all the teachers inside of your entire physical education program. Another underpinning issue is accuracy and consistency of assessment. How can you give a quantitative number or a quantitative number to a qualitative value? That is the toughest job as a physical educator. We have to assess, we have all these areas, we have the knowledge, we have the skills, we have the attitudes and behaviors. How do we give a number or a letter on a report card to accurately or communicate where the child is on their journey? It's a daunting task. And then we have consistencies between teachers, students, and time. Is the assessment consistent between teacher and teacher? Is the student being accurately assessed in one period of time to another to another? Those are all things we need to think about, is how is our accuracy and consistency of our assessment practice in our classroom? It also needs to be clear and effective. Do students' parents or the school even know what you're assessing? How do they know? Do they understand what you're looking for as a professional? What are the next steps you give after you give the student feedback? Is feedback being reported in a timely manner? And one thing I always look at is, I used to use the reference autopsy versus a checkup. Should the report card be an autopsy of what happened after the issue happened? Or should it be like you're checking your oil, where you check it from time to time to avoid those major issues? I personally believe that it should be a checkup. It shouldn't be an autopsy. It shouldn't be the end report of something and then move on. It's a checkup, and if there is an issue, that's where we as professionals step in to support our students. Also, how is assessment being used to foster student growth? And is our assessment engaging high-level students and bringing in those students who are at risk at leaving our class, those students who don't want to be there? Are we engaging those students? Are we trying to find a way to motivate them into our classroom? Are we looking for assessment for learning? Sometimes we look at our end product, but we sometimes forget about the journey that we got from point A to point B. So is assessment being used to foster our student growth? So when students see that they're learning, naturally they want to inquire, and that's where I put in our phys ed inquiry cycle. When students see that they're learning and that they're developing, that they're fostering, it just intrinsically triggers something. It's like, hey, I want to go through this cycle. I want to see what steps. I want to have a higher understanding and learning of this. Inquiry learning just equals a deeper understanding of standards and outcomes, which is our critical learning in our phys ed environment. And is assessment engaging high-level students and at-risk students? So does it communicate to the high-level students, how can they improve? What's their next steps? Or should they just be able to coast because they're reaching at their max? They're reaching the highest value of our rubric or a grade. How can we communicate to them that they can still go that much further to meet their full potential? And how do we avoid punishing or holding back our at-risk students? They need to show that they have a mastery of learning, but we need to paint that environment that makes them successful. Is our assessment getting students involved in the learning process? Yes, I love this cartoon for this exact. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. We have all of our different animals with different skill sets asked to take the same test. So our students are just like these animals, and they're different in so many different ways that treating them and assessing them the same is unfair. Fairness doesn't always mean equal. So assessment should document the individual student's journey towards mastery of the standards or outcomes, not their journey related to the class, their journey themselves. How are they proceeding along their development? And this is where differentiation in assessment comes in. So our professional judgment observations need to encourage this communication piece. Are we communicating that our students are growing individually, or are we comparing them to the group? Next thing, student motivation. This can definitely motivate and engage students' successful behavior, but can also disengage and demotivate those double at-risk students. Motivated by those letter grades on those report cards. They want to get that A. They want to get that 7 out of 7. They want those high grades. But in the past, assessment has been used as an extrinsic motivator to drive student behavior. So reward for high achievement, punishing for those kids who are not meeting expectations. And usually two things happen. The reward for learning should be intrinsic. Students would focus on the reward punishment rather than on the standards, outcomes, desired behavior. And then you would need to continuously increase the reward or punishment. But the secret to being good and being great is having that intrinsic motivation built into our students. So our assessment practices need to encourage our students to higher performance standards, because the focus is on mastery skill and not just the reward or punishment of receiving that high grade or low grade. And it increases natural engagement, which increases the student accountability, which overall increases our mastery of learning. So the fixes. We have all of our underpinning issues, but it comes from just a few simple fixes. One thing is just a mission statement. Mission statements for our PE programs. After we have that, let's develop our assessment policy for our physical education programs in our school. Once we have those down, we develop our quality assessments, and then we implement and plan those assessments into our school. So I want to talk about our first fix, which is developing a mission statement. This has to be the driving force for your physical education program. This is the overarching goal of your program. This is your header. This is your top of your pyramid. This is what you want students to achieve when they leave your school. This also encourages backwards by design assessment and planning by professionals. So everything from assessment to year planning to unit planning and daily lesson planning links back to this statement. So the program is now directly linked to the ultimate end product of your physical education program. This also helps program department heads keep a clear focus, which helps focus and drives your program and improves student learning and achievement. I take a look at the two goals, and one goal is from the Shape America standards, and one's from Alberta Education. These are the mission statements of those programs of studies. The goal of physical education is to develop physically literate individuals who have the knowledge, skills, and confidence to enjoy a lifetime of healthful physical activity. You don't have to take that word for word, but you can change it so that it matches and communicates your priorities. So first step, let's take a look at your curriculum. What curriculum are you using? Everybody's using a different curriculum. Some people use national standards. Some people have state standards. You need to really look at your curriculum. This is going to be your #1 source for your quality assessment and planning practices, and this is going to help with the other fixes along the way. Have a soft mission statement ready for you to use, like I just spoke about. We also need to evaluate your current mission statement if you already have one. Does it identify the key values of your curriculum? Does it meet the needs of your students? Is it in a language that your students and parents can understand? Or, unfortunately, is it full of educational jargon, which gets bogged up, and people tend to lose that communication piece when we start using our educational jargon? Then modify to suit your program needs. No matter where you are in your physical education journey as a department, modify to suit your needs. I've had a conversation with teachers and they have an issue with just basic participation statements so that it encourages and focuses quality engagement by all students. So really take a look at what your program needs and make it specific to fit your school's needs. Is it knowledge development versus skill development versus behavior or attitude development, or are you developing leadership? When developing your mission statement, I like to use the KISS principle. So just keep it short and simple. Make it straight to the point, specific on what you want to see, and simple so that it's easy to communicate and easy to keep focus. Once we have our mission statement, this is where we need to step in and develop an assessment policy. Our assessment policy comes from your mission statement, and your assessment policy needs to include the 4 C's of assessment: continuous, collaborative, comprehensive, and criteria. For our continuous, our first principle in continuous, this should be used based on general specific outcomes from your curriculum. It should be used to encourage student learning rather than a final judgment, and should be part of an instruction done in a variety of contexts, using varied methods and instruments that match each specific outcome. The process also needs to be collaborative so that they become more responsible for their own learning and develop a positive attitude towards leading an active and healthy lifestyle. It should also help make students feel competent and successful related to their own physical abilities and encourage them to set goals for further improvements. Parents, possibly the community, and different degrees at different times. Then we have our comprehensive. These should address the curricular outcomes and include a variety of strategies that meet the diverse learning needs of students. These should be developmentally appropriate, age and gender appropriate, or modified to your specific needs of your department. They also need to be criteria-based. Assessment practices should identify critical aspects of the performance that describe demonstrating student learning. This should include students in identifying and/or creating the criteria, and should be communicated to students so that they know what the target is in relation to where they're at. We also have accountability. I like to throw accountability in there because we need to start getting our students accountable for their learning. When you become accountable, that's when your mastery level just increases. So students don't understand how they can achieve specific levels of mastery. They will not hold themselves accountable for their learning. Students need to have that feel that they belong in the process. This needs to guide and structure the learning and not just create a final judgment that's placed on them by an adult, by a teacher. This must also be an opportunity for students' voice to be heard through the assessment. Students love to give feedback and they love to be heard. Once they get that feedback, they're heard, they're accountable. Once they have that feeling, they really enjoy the process and become an integral part of our assessment practice. So when looking at our assessment policy, simple practice I like to use is called rock, pebbles, and sand. You have your rocks, your pebbles, and your sand. I like to use the jar analogy where we have rocks, our pebbles, and sand, and how do we fit it all in the jar? And separately, in different order or at the wrong time, it doesn't fit. But if we put it in strategically, that's where we can get everything in and make it fit in a nice, neat jar. That, just like our curriculum or our standards that we need to follow. So your rocks, these are the big ideas of your PE program. These are your major enduring understandings. These are the things when kids come back in 20, 30 years, they remember those things. The pebbles, these supplement the big ideas. These are specific outcome standards that can be used to create assessment language and the materials to assess them. This transfers curriculum jargon into student, parent-friendly language. And then the sand. Those are those small specific things that we need to address, we need to talk about. These can be specific skill development. They could be unit assessments based on dance, gymnastics, manipulatives. These can be those things that are designed, and this is where student voice can definitely come in, where they can have their unit assessment they can create one for dance. This is a really good place for student voice to be heard in the PE assessment. This is where all that research comes to pay off. So if we're looking at creating our rocks, most curriculum is organized into general outcomes and standards, and these can potentially be modified to be the rocks in your assessment policy. The specific outcome standards follow these general standards, and this creates our pebbles. On our right, this is from Alberta Education, where we have 4 general outcomes. They develop skills and through a variety of developmentally appropriate movements. They understand health benefits, interact positively with others, and assume responsibility to an active way of life. In your assessment policy based on the criteria of the outcomes. Looking at the national standards, we have 5 national standards where we talk about the physically literate demonstrates competency in a variety of motor skills, the knowledge and concepts and principles. They also can demonstrate the skills to achieve the health enhancing levels of physical activity. They exhibit responsibility for personal and social behavior, and they recognize the value of physical activity for health enjoyment, challenge, and self-expression over social interaction. Throughout your curriculum, you're given all these tools. So I'd like to share with you one of our assessments here at the school that we developed last year. Excuse me. So this is our assessment policy for our KG2 all the way to our grade 4 elementary classes. This is where we base off the Shape America standards, and our 5 standards were created into the 4 areas of our PE assessment. Those were our rocks. We took the 5 standards, molded 1 and 2 together to create 4 assessment areas, which we report on individually during reporting periods. These assessment areas are communicated individually on the report cards. This also gives clear feedback on student progress in specific areas. Students don't all develop the skill set in the same time frame. Their motor skills might not be up to where they understand the health principles, or they truly get the value of physical activity, or their leadership and social development is lagging or is way ahead, but their skill development is not quite there. Grades are specific to the units and areas of learning that occurred in that reporting period, and the grades are based on a 4-point scale to follow our school assessment policy. For our assessment practice, the value of physical activity is a daily assessment. This is where every class we'd assess our students out of 4 based on them demonstrating the value of physical activity using a rubric that we have designed. Understanding the health principles and cooperation, leadership, social development is at the end of the unit, which integrate reflective activities for students to complete and assess in these areas. Conversations with individual students, Google Classroom, blog posts, observations from the professional. There's 1,000,001 different methods to get this reflective piece in there, which I want to talk about in a little bit later. Skills and knowledge development is both a formative assessment and a summative assessment at the end of the unit. You have a little pre-assessment at the beginning of the unit to assess the skills knowledge level, so you can even change your teaching strategies as a professional, but you also get to have a choice or an opportunity to let the student demonstrate their growth. You can also develop specific skill assessment rubrics. This is your SAND that can be created to give even more specific feedback. So great for students that are new, and also helps professionals in creating lessons, providing teaching points for students who are struggling. The weighting of the assessments are based on the priorities set by the PE program. We are really emphasizing our value of demonstrating the value of physical activity. We want to see those positive behaviors. If you wanted to change those things, that is up to your department and your program to make that decision. So one thing we always talked about is avoiding the autopsy and just to have the checkup. This method it's live. Students can look at it, parents can look at it and see where they're at. You can have those conversations, supportive conversations with family if a student's struggling. But let's look specifically into it. So once we have our assessment policy, let's create our quality assessments. That was our broad overview, but our quality assessments need to reflect our 4 C's: collaborative, comprehensive, criteria-based.
Hey, Jace, we have a question from the Tazzle.
Yeah, go ahead.
Someone is wondering how the middle school and the high school can work together to vertically align their curriculum.
So to vertically align the curriculum, that's a really good question. And that comes from the departments as well. Like, you could use your assessment policy to vertically align it, where if your assessment policy is consistent throughout your entire phys ed program, then your vertical alignment of your actual standards should follow in theory, because what you're assessing in middle school is going to be building off what you've assessed in elementary, then what they assess in high school is built off what they've assessed in middle school. So everything should scaffold up from that point. If a program's struggling to do that, my suggestion is the time to look at your curriculum. What are your rock sands and pebbles that you need to focus on? What are the things you need to really emphasize throughout, and how can you make that consistent through all your grades? Hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you so much. You can continue.
Where's my present button? There it is. So looking back at that assessment policy, this is the same theory, but in 2 different places. Here we have activity standard 5, and then we also have our skill and knowledge development and all of that. And I do apologize for the picture. I try to get it as clear as I can. The assessment language is converted into curricular outcome standards into student-friendly language. This communicates clearly to students the difference in mastery levels. Clear details and motivation of students and how to help improve and maintain their levels. This also helps us collaborative conversations with students, parents, or to help those struggling students. This also gives parents the tools they need to be involved in the student improvement from home. If this is in a language that they all can understand, they can help implement it at home and have those conversations. This also gives our professional judgment concrete footing. In lab reports, we have our assessment tools. It only works if our assessments reflect our 4 C's of assessment policies. So it's communicating quite clearly with the parents what's going on. It's collaborative. We are comprehensive, and it's criteria-based. This also avoids distorting a student achievement. So this avoids the rewarding or punishment. And I want to show you an example of one that was made early in my career, where punishing rewarding students with grades for only only extrinsically motivates the learner. So when students clearly understand what's expected of them, it helps build that intrinsic motivation. A topic of punishment versus rewarding is changing in PE. Should we be assessing students if they come to class prepared or not? Is that a behavior that we should be assessing? Is that a behavior in our curriculum? So achievements based on curricular outcomes, not standards. So sitting out non-participants, changing in PE, student learning objectives are clearly stated, which help aid conversations with parents. So don't motivate with the grades, motivate with support and communication with home and from administration. So I want to show you the progress here, because it was a journey to get to this spot. So before, this was a rubric 5 years before this one. Obviously, the assessment or the curriculum was different. This on the left is Alberta curriculum, on the right is national standards. The change in evolution of this removes awarding punishing behaviors on time, being prepared, and attendance. So these qualities of a student should be reported and communicated outside of an assessment. This is communication home, this is in report card comments, specific unit comments. We shouldn't be communicating these types of behaviors with a mark. These are things that need to be those conversations, those face-to-face. This also avoids the effort debate. So to some, effort is a subjective area. Professional judgment is often not trusted here, because if efforts in one person might be looking for effort in a different person, it's too all over the place, it's inconsistent. So assessment language must be used that gives this area concrete feel. Behavior focuses on the attitudes of behaviors that are outlined in the curriculum. This is criteria based, and when further examined using specific outcomes, can easily be assessed and progress communicated with parents and students. I talked earlier about bringing reflection. Now this is a reflection unit I'm using for my sports education model class, where reflective learning is the key to developing a critical understanding of the content, of the knowledge, of the behaviors and attitudes. When students reflect on the learning, their journey application of the concepts can be made into planned improvements. You put it in the power for the students to identify their areas that they need to improve in, their areas that they're strong in. They become so powerful. So the difference between good and great is self-identifying improvements and implementing them. This demonstrates that critical understanding, that critical thinking in our assessment. We also have another method for our lower elementary. So how did we do today? Just a quick daily student reflection. That is amazing. Just the students go walk by, have that conversation, have that 5-second stop and sit and reflect, just to see how things were doing and how they assess themselves. Reflective assessment is such a powerful tool, and then we need to utilize that a little bit more in our everyday assessment practices. Another quality assessment is the physical literacy assessment for youth. Now I've used this in the past couple of years, well actually last year with my KG2s, and this is a great tool developed by Sport for Life out of Canada. It's an opportunity where us as professionals can assess individual students on their physical literacy journey, their basic motor skills, their basic behaviors. We can also assess an entire class. You could also give it the opportunity to be reflective. Students have the opportunity to log in and set goals. And when you start implementing this in a class with a plan, very powerful tool. So an excellent resource for assessing physical literacy skill and the potential to replace fitness testing to show student development. Conversation about fitness testing or our play assessment tool. Where fitness testing is certain physical qualities that we're looking for out of PE, but is it giving us a full picture? Where our play assessment tool, that's giving us a little bit fuller picture, because we start looking at behaviors and attitudes demonstrated by our students. Written assessments. Is there a place for written assessments in PE? So writing tests take quality movement time away from our students. I look at the research and I see the articles where schools are down to 2 to 3 PE classes a week, even a month if they're lucky. But can we start assessing our students through play and through our professional observations? Can we give ourselves that footing to trust our professional judgments enough where we can make a quality assessment based on our criteria-based assessment policy. If we can do those things, the need for writing assessments, taking away that movement time, we won't be needing it anymore. Last step in our fixes is plan for quality assessments. Your plans need to be fluid. So this goes from our year plans to our unit plans to our lesson plans. I always like this quote from the Guardians of the Galaxy is, I have a plan that's about 11%. 11% is better than no plan. If you're in plans in the development stage, that's okay. As long as you're consciously thinking about how do I fit assessment into these areas? Where does my assessment fit in? That is a great start. It doesn't have to be designed fully. It could be a year-long process, but as long as those ideas are inside your year plans, your unit plans, and your lesson plans, that's where it starts. So let's talk about our year plan. So like this is the 300,000 foot in the sky look of your overall program to bring in your specific assessment needs. This is just an example of what I did last year. So starting from my 300,000 foot view, looking down into my assessment, where does it fit in? So for my unit, I'd be putting in the value of physical education. I'd be looking at my assessment policy. This is also where you can start putting in your play assessment. This is where you want to throw those assessment tools and those ideas that you have where you can further integrate them. Just in your year planning, your year overview. This past year, I moved into the IB school where we had PYP. One thing I love about the PYP approach is in their planning, they have a spot and there's like, how might we know what we have learned? And I've taken that and changed it a little bit. With this, we have a pre-assessment task. So what are they going to know to show me their initial skill set? Okay, what is going to be another formative assessment? So what's their performance assessment to show me that there's development, that there's growth, that there's learning inside my unit planning? And then at the end, how am I going to assess that overall development? What is going to be the end summative assessment that I'm going to use to determine assessment for and assessment of learning? Also looking down into my daily plans. So this is where the value of physical activity comes in. The design skill pre-assessment can be sitting in there. From that 300,000 foot view, we're getting a little bit narrower, a little bit closer, looking at the smaller picture. The smallest picture is our lesson plans. Moving into our lesson plans, we have a great area to develop and plan our lesson for our students, getting them engaged, our curricular links, but also we need to have an area where we can link our activity to the assessment practice we are going to do. This is just an example from the Alberta education, where assessment is all across the entire lesson, not just in the middle part, but throughout the entire lesson, where we're constantly could be assessing using our professional judgment and our observations of our students. So those are the 4 fixes and some of the underpinning issues that we have. We have about 5 minutes left, Sarah?
Yes, we do. We have about 5 minutes left. I've been asking the group in the TASL if they have any questions, and it doesn't look like anybody has any. But your presentation was really thorough, which I like
that people liked my cartoon. I'm just looking at the TASL now myself.
Yes. Yeah, we had some quick discussions about like what outcomes people are using. We had one teacher mention that this is the first year that they're actually going to be assigning grades. It's a teacher who teaches pretty much exclusively adapted phys ed, and for the first time in 10 years, he'll have to be assigning grades to students.
It's a great step forward. I saw Adam had one question. Yes, I did get my master's from Ohio University, home of the Bobcats. I did get that there.
Got it. So he was wondering if you played sports there, because he's a huge Michigan fan, and he was joking around that he couldn't think of any other good reason to go to Ohio. Cool. Well, Jace, let's start wrapping it up really quickly. I just want to thank you for presenting and want to thank everybody who watched the session for joining in. And just one last reminder that you can access the survey for the Phys Ed Summit at physedagogy.com. And once you fill it out, we will send you a certificate of attendance via email. So thanks so much, Jace.
Well, thank you everybody for logging in so early wherever you are in North America. And if you guys ever have any questions or just want to have that professional conversation, information is there. So,
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jace.
all right, thank you everybody and enjoy the rest of the PE Summit.